welcome to the course Introduction to Advanced Cognitive Processes. This is the 6th week and we are talking about problem solving. In the last lecture I talked a little bit about an introduction into problem solving, what all aspects that problem solving involve, and I also talked about things like how to represent the problem correctly in order to get to solutions more easily. We also talked about an approach of situated cognition, wherein the idea is that a lot of problems, a lot of things that you learn to solve are in some sense related very closely to the context, and it might be sometimes difficult to transfer the learning in a specific context such as in a classroom to a real life scenario, and that it is advisable that even classroom teaching for that matter should involve aspects that teach people to be able to apply those problems in real life settings. That is basically how effective problem solving shall be taught. Today I am going to start talking a little bit about problem solving strategies, and we will talk about how these these strategies are efficient or inefficient. So, there are various strategies that people have used to try and solve various kinds of problems, and obviously different strategies are used for different kinds of problems, and one of the things that determine your success in solving a particular problem is the choice of the correct strategy. So, we will just take a couple of these kind of methods, so strategies, if you start discussing about strategies, some strategies might be very direct, some strategies might be rather straightforward, direct, that takes less time and very efficient at solving the problems. While there could be other kinds of strategies that people might erroneously pick, which basically might lead to spending a lot of time, spending a lot of effort, and still not really guaranteeing or giving us a good solution. So, one has to be very careful, one has to be very wary of the fact that correct kind of strategies are selected to really approach particular kinds of problems. So, algorithms are one of those kind of strategies. Now, an algorithm is just a method that will always lead you to solve a problem, that will always lead you to the almost a correct solution to a particular problem, but then algorithms, in the sense because they are detailed and stuff, can sometimes be very inefficient, and they generally would take a lot of time. Suppose you can take an algorithm as a very methodical approach to solving a particular problem, but a lot of times, and you can link this to your real life scenarios as well, a lot of times methodically and gradually solving a problem is not an option that we have. Sometimes you have a lot of time pressure, sometimes you really want to achieve something very quickly, and then elaborate algorithms, even though they are almost guaranteeing you a solution, are not really chosen by individuals. So, in that sense, a lot of times algorithms will not be really very productive. An example of such an algorithm could be something like an exhaustive search. Now, an exhaustive search, as the name suggests, is when you are trying out all the possible answers using a specified system. Suppose, for example, you are solving an algebra problem, and the algebra problem has, let us say, two variables x and y, and you have to solve for x. Now, one of the short ways of really doing this kind of a problem is basically just assuming start from x is equals to 0, y is equals to 1, and just start putting each of these values in the equation till you finally reach a particular kind of a solution. Now, even though this method will certainly and in a guaranteed fashion give you the solution of the equation, but the point is it is going to take a lot of time, and because it is going to take a lot of time and effort, it is not really a very efficient way to solve that problem. In that sense, algorithms are often really inefficient, and they are often unsophisticated, but there are also even more unsophisticated methods that can come up with possibilities and that offer you particular kinds of choices to reach particular kinds of solutions. Say, for example, if you are given this task of finding out words from anagrams and stuff, and suppose you are given this letter here, this L, S, S, T and NEUIAMYUL, and you have to figure out, arrange it in a particular way that you can figure out a word that is made from these collection of letters. Now, what you would need to do is you have to kind of work out various permutations and combinations. If you're not really aware of the correct word, you will kind of spend a lot of time if you're following things like an exhaustive search mechanism. You are going to spend an inordinate amount of effort before you are even closer to solution, because there are so many words and it's very difficult because there are so many letters, there are so many permutation and combination that you will need to finally reach this. So, what you can do is you can actually pick up a strategy, and the strategy could be, suppose for example, I will just try and figure out the first two letters of whatever this big word is, and once you start figuring out the first two letters, that could basically be just 2 or 3 things. So, for example, you can have SNT, you can have SNU, SNA, SNI, those kind of combinations. And this one, by the way, from all the number of combinations possible, suppose if you were conducting exhaustive search and it has been calculated that you would basically there could be almost 87 billion possible arrangement of letters. So, obviously, that's completely out of the question, but if you take such kind of a strategy, just start by the first two letters and kind of figure out how the rest of the word could be, that could lead you to a solution much easily in much more in much more efficiently and much less amount of time. So, even though this is a slightly unsophisticated way of doing it, even though this does not really guarantee a solution in some sense, but this is a quicker way of doing it. Okay. So, this kind of arrangement is basically referred to as what is called a heuristic. So, from all the possible solutions that might be there, I picked up a method and I kind of bet my gut on it and said that okay, there is an X% chance that I will be able to solve this problem using this method, and I started trying that out and eventually figured out what the solution is. These kind of methods, these kind of general rules are basically referred to as heuristics, and these are usually correct. In problem solving literature, heuristics are taken as strategies where you are obviously choosing to ignore some alternatives and kind of exploring only those alternatives that seem most likely to you to be able to produce a solution. So, it is almost kind of a gamble. It does not really guarantee a solution just like an exhaustive search kind of mechanism would give, but certainly offers a high chance, a good chance of solving a particular problem in a slightly more efficient way. Psychologists have conducted a lot of research on heuristics. Psychologists have conducted a lot of research on the kind of heuristics problem solvers use and much less on what kind of algorithms they are. So, because a lot of problems in the real life you cannot really come up with an elaborate algorithm to solve it, while you would see is most often people pick up a particular heuristic and then start using it. Okay, say for example, if you have to select the most appropriate life partner that you would want to have, an exhaustive search mechanism would actually involve testing all the possible partners that might be there, but then obviously nobody does that. You kind of follow a heuristic based on particular parameters and kind of playing around with those parameters that will help you make this decision. Obviously, this does not really guarantee this a correct solution. That one might guarantee you a correct solution, but that's completely impossible to do. This heuristic here, suppose for example, you can go with the go with various factors that might be of importance to you, and they might help you in zeroing down on a particular person. So, this is basically just to elaborate the difference between what a heuristic and what an algorithm is like. So, let us discuss a little bit about different heuristics. Now, one of the heuristics that people often use is referred to as the means ends heuristic. So, the idea is that this one has two components. First is that you divide the larger problem into a set of smaller problems or sub problems, and then what you have to do is that you have to try to reduce the difference between the initial state and the goal state. Okay. So, whatever steps or manipulations that you have to do, basically you have to kind of start solving each of these sub problems, eventually leading to solve the major problem. So, this is the goal state where you have where you have to reach. This is the initial state where you start solving the problem, and in between are the steps that you take, or let us say there are so many sub problems that you need to solve in order to solve the eventual problem. Now, the means ends heuristic is a rather appropriate heuristic because it requires you to identify the goal state or the ends, and then it also requires to figure out the means, that is the steps that you would need to take to reach those ends. When problem solvers use the means ends heuristic, they must focus their attention on the difference between the initial state and the goal state. So, what you have to really pay attention to is where is the point that you want to reach, where is the point that you are, and basically what are the steps that you could take to shorten this gap, to close this gap. Researchers emphasize that this heuristic is one of the most effective and one of the most flexible ways of problem solving, because there is so many sub problems. It is not like that you are kind of just decided and set on a single path and you have to do that in order to solve the problem. The different sub problems are contingent on so many different factors, and you can be very flexible about which route to take, which step to take at what point in order to eventually solve the problem. Now, and if you actually just take a step back and think, all the time we are using the means ends analysis, very effectively and very often to solve so many problems. I am reminded of this anecdotal story of the thirsty crow. When the crow is thirsty, it's moving around in a jungle and there is no water, all the ponds and stuff have dried up, and then he figures out that there is this jar there, and that jar has a little water at the bottom, but obviously the crow cannot get inside the jar and drink it. So, what the crow decides to do is, the crow decides to pick up stones and fill the jar up with stones so that the water comes up, and the crow eventually is able to drink the water. Now, what is the crow doing here? The crow is basically doing sort of a means ends analysis and then breaking the larger problem of drinking water into two steps. The first is to locate that there is water, and the second is to bring that water up to a level that can be drunk using the beak. So, this kind of means end analysis is something that we are almost doing on a daily basis, and we are kind of using this rather successfully to solve a lot of problems that we encounter. So, when one uses the means ends heuristics to solve a problem, one can proceed either in the forward direction from the initial state to goal state. You just take a series of steps 1, 2, 3, 4 to reach the step, or sometimes you can just deconstruct the journey. You can start from step 6, which is the goal state, and start coming back. Okay, this is what I have to achieve. Just one step before is what, just one step before is what, and stuff like that. Both are possible. Okay. And there has been a lot of research on means ends heuristics. Researchers have demonstrated that how people organize their problems into sub problems. So, it has been shown that people do organize the information that is given in a problem into shorter, into smaller problems, and they use that to eventually reach good solutions. A demonstration again from Matlin's book is the hobbit and ox problem. This is the one that is actually similar to the goat and crocodile problem that I was referring to in the last lecture. So, there is this the problem is that there are 3 hobbits and 3 orcs. Orcs are violent creatures. So, if both of these groups are here on one side of the river and they just have one boat to go to cross the river and go to the other side. Now, the interesting thing is there can be only 2 persons that can travel on this boat, and also what you have to ensure is the fact that at any side, if there are more orcs and less hobbits, the orcs will attack and eat up the hobbits. So, the goal state of this problem is that everybody crosses the river in a boat that has just capacity of 2 people and nobody ends up dead. Now, one of the things that people use to solve this problem is basically that the larger problem is to go cross the river, but the smaller problem also is to ensure that there are at any point there are never more orcs than hobbits on either side of the river. So, that is how people would kind of break this problem down, and they kind of go about solving this big problem. So, they did this study, Greeno in 1974, they did this study and they kind of tried to examine how people are solving this hobbits and orcs problem. And this study showed people do pause at particular points and they have to try and tackle a sub problem. Now there are these number of orcs and these number of hobbits on the left side, these number of orcs and these number of hobbits on the right side. How do I do it? they sometimes plan ahead, they sometimes come back, and they kind of organize a sequence of moves such that ensures the correct solution of the problem. Now, in these kind of scenarios, again, just because I was talking about this in the last lecture as well, working memory is especially active. All of these manipulations and looking ahead and looking back is basically happening in your working memory, and this is what the when people this is going on when people are planning one of these move sequences, because you have to in the real time evaluate whatever possible options are there. So, this is just a demonstration of how people might be using the means end heuristic. Now, a lot of research, by the way, confirms that sometimes people are reluctant to move away from a goal state, even if the correct solution sometimes depends on taking a temporary detour. So, for example, the larger problem is crossing the river, but you also have to tackle this problem, because otherwise there are more hobbits at once, there are more orcs at one side and less hobbits, and they will be eaten. Suppose, for example, somebody decides that even in the first round itself, 2 of the hobbits jump on the boat and cross to the other side. Now, the point is, okay, this is leading to solution to the greater problem, but now on this side there is just 1 hobbit and 2 orcs and 3 orcs, and they are just going to eat this one up. So, the idea is, a lot of times people would need to plan, and this happens in daily lives as well. If you have a larger goal at hand, sometimes you would need to plan in such a way that you are engaged in doing things that are not directly leading to a solution, but eventually will lead you to a solution. So, the idea is, these kind of detours, these kind of plannings need to be done in order to achieve good solutions to your problems. So, real life as well, I mean, as I was saying, the problem, as in the problem at hand, it can sometimes be a very effective strategy to sometimes move backwards and then move forward towards the goal state eventually. People do a lot of this kind of thing in games, for example, in chess for that matter. Sometimes you decide to sacrifice particular pawns in order to achieve the larger goal. So, that is again very similar to how people solve problem in these abstract scenarios as well. So, it might be a good idea. So, another example, a classroom example I could take, that it might be you might kind of decide or debate on this whether it is a good idea to submit a poorly done assignment, just to ensure that you are the first one to submit an assignment, or say, for example, submit it just in time, but ensure that you are kind of doing it well and you graded well for that. Finally, there is another heuristic that I would want to talk about, that is the hill climbing heuristic. Now, the hill climbing heuristic is one of the most straightforward ways of solving a particular problem. Imagine, say, for example, that there is a goal to follow a pathway leading on the top of the hill. Now, and there are 2 options that you presented. One is the direct path, one is the slightly wounding path. What you would want to choose is that you will probably want to choose the direct path, the path which has the more steeper incline, because it is kind of guaranteeing, it is kind of telling you that very quickly you will reach there. But and there is the other path which is wounding, which is going to take a lot of times. A lot of times what people would do is they would directly choose the path that has the steep incline and gives the chance of solving this problem correctly. But when people even in real life, for that matter, when people reach such a choice point, they use what is called this kind of scenario, what is called the hill climbing heuristic, to pick up alternatives that seem to lead to the goal state most directly. Quick fix solutions, efficient and fast solutions. Now, the thing is that this hill climbing heuristic can be useful when one does not really have enough information about the alternatives, because you do not have really a lot of information about what is going to happen in future. You might want to take these kind of quick decisions. But like many heuristics, the hill climbing heuristic also can lead you astray. The biggest drawback is the problem solvers must consistently choose the alternative that appears to be most direct, but in doing that you are ignoring a slightly slower, a slightly less direct, but a better alternative. For example, the most direct path sometimes may come to an abrupt end. The most direct path may offer dangers of falling down and stuff like that. So, the idea is the hill climbing heuristic is in that sense a slightly risky heuristic to take. It obviously, as being a heuristic, does not really offer you a guaranteed solution, and it is in that sense a high risk kind of a decision. So, the hill climbing heuristic, obviously as I was saying, it does not guarantee you that you will reach the goal state, it just kind of allures you with that kind of solution. So, that is from this all from me about heuristics and some of the strategies of problem solving that we discussed. We will talk about more strategies of problem solving in the next class.